In this video, I'm going to be showcasing my first custom PC build. I'll go over my part selection, my experience as a first-time builder, and give you a look into the setup I'll be using for my streams going forward. I can't thank you guys enough for the support you've shown me this past year. It's what makes videos like this possible. Thus, I want to reinvest back into the channel. Along with the giveaways, I've decided to also upgrade my PC because so many of you have complained about the frame rate on my old potato computer. So with that, let's get into the build. Before I get into the rest of this video, I have to tell you about today's sponsor, Opera GX, the first PC web browser built specifically for gamers. When Opera reached out to me for this sponsorship, I was super excited because not only have I been a pleased user of their mobile app for many years, but I'm also an investor in the company. So I'm eager to download this browser and test it out. You can also do that by using the download link in the description. Alright guys, I'm back here on my new completed PC build with Opera GX installed, and after playing around with it for a few hours, I can say the customization level is tremendous. Aesthetically, there is a lot you can change, from the theme, background image, background music, sound effects, animation tiles, and a whole lot more. Personally, I just changed the background image and turned on their force dark mode setting. I'd also like to add that this browser is based on Chromium, so most of your favorite extensions will work in Opera. Personally, I've added Google Translate, and I also use their built-in default ad blocker. In every tab, you can click on this camera to screenshot the page and save it as a PNG or PDF. You can also crop smaller sections of the page and edit them right in browsers, such as blurring them or drawing on them before copying them straight to your clipboard. Speaking of quality of life measures for gamers, on the left is GX Control. First off, it allows you to monitor the resources your tabs are using and kill them if necessary, instead of having to kill the whole app in Task Manager. Additionally, you can set limits for the browser's usage of your bandwidth, RAM, and CPU to ensure that Opera won't interfere with your gaming experience while it is running in the background. For those of you who want to multitask playing a game while also watching one of my guide videos, there's a video pop-out feature for that. Another feature that you might appreciate if you're like me and organize your tasks by tabs is the ability to break your tabs into labeled sections such as home, work, school, games, research, and more. Fully customizable for you to organize how you want, and finally be able to read your tabs descriptions again. Opera GX has full integration with Twitch and Discord, so you get notifications right on the side of the browser. You can join my Discord server using the invite link in the description. Next up, for those interested in geo-hopping, there is an integrated encrypted proxy service that you can turn on with the click of a button. This feature allows you to jump between 3 different IP locations and is completely free with no data limits. As for services like this, I suggest reading the privacy statement. And finally, when you're done, you can use the GX Cleaner to wipe your tracks with the click of a button. Overall, I really liked what this browser had to offer, and I'd recommend any gamer with a new PC to give it a try. So my primary goal with this build was to use it for gaming as well as getting good frame rates and streaming. However, I was also interested in being able to keep the costs down as well as have some security and hardware kill switches. On top of that, I decided that I also wanted an optical drive, so there's that. That influenced some of my decisions, such as the case. So some of the key components I used in this build are the Asus Republic of Gamers Strix B550-F gaming motherboard with a Wi-Fi adapter. For the processor, I used AMD's Ryzen 7 3700X. And for the graphics card, I used NVIDIA's GeForce GTX 1660 Super. There are a lot of parts that go into making a custom PC, so if you want the full list of all the components in this build, there will be a link in the description so you can see them all typed out. If you want to easily buy the same parts as me, you'll be able to use my affiliate Amazon links from that page. I bought this computer completely on Amazon, and it set me back a little over $1,700. So here we are with the full compilation of all the packages coming in the mail. I was really nervous that I'd be missing a package or that something would get damaged in the mail, but to my benefit, everything came on time and undamaged. So here's what all the parts look like unboxed finally. That is a lot of parts, and we're going to turn this whole hunk of parts into one PC, hopefully working. So first off, we have to start out with the motherboard. Once again, I went with the Asus Republic of Gamers Strix B550-F gaming with the Wi-Fi adapter for my motherboard and a Ryzen 7 3700X processor. I checked about 5 times to make sure that this processor slot worked with the motherboard slot, but I was still pretty nervous given this was my first time. Excluding the graphics card, these two components are the most expensive parts of the computer, with the processor over $300 and the motherboard over $200. So let's open up the motherboard, and here with the motherboard coming in the anti-static wrap, we also got a certificate of authenticity, the manual, which we would refer to many times in this build, a couple of stickers, some zip ties, some cables, and additionally we purchased the Wi-Fi antenna that attaches externally. Overall, pretty nice. With the motherboard out of the anti-static wrap, we move on to unboxing the processor, which is really a very expensive small square that includes a not very expensive fan. I undid the latch on the motherboard and slid the processor in. It fit very nicely, and I reapplied the latch, all fitting nice and snugly into the motherboard, all while hoping I didn't break a pin. Next up was for me to apply the fan so that the processor didn't overheat. This fan already came with a pre-applied thermal paste, so I didn't have to go out and purchase one. I just applied the fan on top. Then I used the latches on the right and left of the fan to secure it to the motherboard. Not going to lie, I did look up a YouTube video to make sure that I had it locked in place. And finally, I plugged the fan into the motherboard so that it would have power when the motherboard got plugged in. Next, I opted to install the M.2 drive. For this, I use Samsung's VNAND solid-state drive 970 EVO Plus. On this motherboard, there are 2 slots for M.2 drives. Both come with a thermal shield that you have to unscrew first before installing the M.2 drive. The motherboard also came with screws that were needed for propping up the drive. With the heat shield screwed back in, I opted to add the RAM next. For this, I used G.skill's Trident Z RGB series, and I used 2 of them, 8GB each, for a total of 16GB of RAM. These are DDR4. I really think the heat sinks on these are really cool looking. I probably spent 15 minutes looking at the motherboard manual to see which 2 of the 4 slots I wanted to install the RAM in. But with that, I finally completed adding the components to the motherboard that I wanted before I was set to install it into the case. For the case, I went with FSP's ATX mid-tower case. It has a translucent side, 3 pre-installed colored fans, 2 USB 2 ports, and 2 USB 3 ports, and most importantly, a spot for an optical drive, something pretty rare for most cases in 2021. This case perfectly fit the motherboard size that I had, something a lot of new PC builders forget to check, and it came with the screws needed to install it. With the motherboard now in the case, it was time to install the internal drive. For that, I used Silicon Power's 512GB solid-state drive. I just screwed it into the side of the case to be plugged in a little later on in this build. Next up in the build is the most expensive component, and that is the graphics card, clocking in at nearly $400. For my GPU, I used NVIDIA's GeForce GTX 1660 Super. The fan setup I used was by Zotac Gaming. I decided to connect the graphics card to the motherboard after it had already been screwed into the case because of the horizontal orientation of it compared to the motherboard. The back of the case has these metal vents that you have to break off so that you can expose the HDMI ports of the graphics card. Unfortunately, once you break them off, you cannot reattach them. And so if you're like me and you break off the wrong ones that don't line up with your graphics card, you're kind of out of luck. Luckily, the case provides an additional 1 spare that you can screw on that has circle vents. You can see there that I attached it. But if you mess up more than once, you're kind of out of luck and you're going to get a lot of dust build up in your build. So be careful about what ones you break off. Next up, it's time to get some power in here. So it is the power supply time. I went with Cooler Master's 750 watt power supply. Now this was a little bit of overkill. Before I bought anything, I plugged in all the components into a watt calculator, and 750 watts is definitely more than I needed. So you could definitely lower this if you're building this yourself. However, I wanted to give myself some room to get some higher power components in the future in case I wanted to upgrade. This power supply comes with a bag full of SATA cables and a bunch of other cables that you could possibly need for your custom PC build. And while all these cords looked really daunting to attach, I decided to move on to the optical drive instead and deal with this problem later. Now it's 2021 and I'm sure many of you are questioning why I have an optical drive in my PC, but over the years I have come to appreciate having disk drives in the computers I've had in the rare instances that I've used them. So I have decided to add a optical disk drive to this computer. And with that, I use the LG WH16NS60 model, which supports Ultra HD Blu-ray writing capabilities, so I can burn all the best stuff. For this case, you just pop off the front, slide in the optical drive, screw on 4 screws, and then you attach the SATA cable. Easy and simple. Now that I got my feet wet with plugging in my first SATA cable, now comes the daunting task of all these cords. This is the part of the build videos where we all just kind of skip and say cable management, and I really don't have anything to say other than in my first time building the PC, I probably spent more time doing cable management and applying where each cable goes where than doing any other part of building this PC. This is just something you kind of have to learn on the trade, and each motherboard and components are a little bit different, so it's going to be based on your manuals. So here I have everything plugged in. Nothing is managed well. I don't have the zip ties in. The back of this computer right now is completely a mess, just all the cables fumbling around, but all of the components are plugged into their proper slots. So this is kind of where all the cables eventually have to go. I recommend doing that and then figuring out which cables you want to band together. Even though you might have to unplug a few cables and replug them in to optimize their paths, I think this is the best tactic for new PC builders. And so with that, we start up the first test and we plug it in and turn on the power supply. The 3 case fans, the CPU fan, and the 2 GPU fans all turn on. The lights are on for the RAM. The disk drive opens and closes. The motherboard lights go on. And so far, it looks like at least everything is getting power. This is just a photo with the lights turned off because RGB is cool. This is a look from the front of the case to show that the disk drive not only opens and closes, but the power button can turn on the PC. As you can see over on the right, all the cables are still just a jumbled mess on the back side, and we'll have to go back and clean those up. But so I can procrastinate the cable management a little bit more, I started to construct the monitor. I had a 27-inch Sceptre curved monitor that runs at 75 Hertz, is LED, connects with an HDMI cable, and is edgeless. It comes with its own mount, and if I ever want to add a dual monitor, it's pretty simple. At first, I was a little bit skeptical of the price tag, but I can say after using it for a little bit, it is awesome. Helps so much with my eyes. Along with the monitor, other add-ons I need with the PC are a keyboard and mouse. I decided to stick with the RGB theme and got Jellycomb's wired backlit keyboard and Bengu's wired gaming mouse. Both components are plug and go with a USB port. Very simple and fairly cheap. Finally, I have to attach the Wi-Fi antenna that came with the motherboard. It attaches externally with 2 plugins and looks like a shark fin. Kind of cool to put on the top of the computer case. I did this just so I didn't have to worry about Ethernet cable length and access in most cases. I'll probably still use Ethernet cables for faster speeds, but this is a nice option to have on the side. Now I have yet to finish cable management or even close up the case in case I need to get back in and change things around, but I've also hooked up the keyboard, mouse, and monitor to see if it posts. And after some finagling, we get to the BIOS screen. Such a relief because so many things are working and I was so worried that something would be dead on arrival. And with that success, I finally get into my cable management nightmare and close up the case. And basically this sums up the hardware steps of building a computer. Please enjoy it running in the dark. The fans are fairly quiet for being all stock. What do you guys think? After the hardware was all done came all the software components. I'm more well versed in this part, but it still took a while. I decided to partition my hard drive and dual boot. I purchased a Windows 10 license and also load up Linux Mint with it. Windows 10 installed without a problem, and I was able to get all the drivers properly. The Linux Mint installation had some issues that I had to problem solve, but eventually we got both to boot. And with the operating systems installed, it was time to download my favorite applications such as Opera GX. Link is in the description if you want to try it out as well. Thank you again to Opera for sponsoring this video. And then just came the task of porting over all my files, which is still ongoing as we speak. So that's my new computer, guys. Thank you guys for all the support over the last year. I hope this helps the quality of the content I make on this channel. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this build. This was my first build ever, so if I did anything wrong that you saw or you have any suggestions for my next time I do this, hopefully not for a very long time, also add those in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see this PC in action as I create guides and stream my game content.